Hey there, welcome back to this week's episode of the C-Town Podcast, where Seattle business owners, entrepreneurs, and community leaders are invited on to share their stories with us. I'm your host, Christian Harris. This week's episode of the C-Town Podcast is brought to you by C-Town Real Estate. Their mission to make a difference extends beyond just their unique and unconventional approach with their clients and their agents. They partner with the community to give back a percentage of the proceeds from each home sale to a local nonprofit of their client's choice. Visit ctown.com, sea-town.com, and experience the difference with C-Town Real Estate today. Welcome back to another episode of the C-Town Podcast. Today I'm joined by an old friend of mine, Brian Nelson, who, amongst other things, is a retired Army officer, which is how I know him. Also a Tacoma TEDx speaker, philanthropist, and a event planner, I guess you could say.
Yeah, my friend said a wedding planner.
Wedding planner,
yeah, not quite, but yeah.
Yep. I think the main thrust of our conversation today, while we'll probably touch on some other stuff, is really your annual event to raise money and bring the community together. It's called Unleashed at Stadium Bowl. Maybe tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Christian. This August will be our 9th year doing the race, and we race up and down the stairs at Stadium High School. It actually.
And where is that?
In Tacoma.
In Tacoma.
Yeah,
okay.
in Tacoma. 10 Things I Hate About You fame. Mm-hmm. That's the school, and so it looks like Hogwarts, and it's got to be one of the most iconic venues on the West Coast. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. But I worked downtown. This was before we met, when I was with the MI battalion, mm-hmm. and I was about to take command, and was thinking, what's the one or two things that I can do to right the ship or influence? And I had realized that. I didn't know when I was an NCO and a company grade officer that I didn't know the boss. And so I thought, well, what I'm going to do is fix that and create a team building thing for our officers. And so we started running the stairs and then playing ultimate or soccer, and then we go to the Hobnob and eat breakfast. And so I tried to bring that over to the sod, mm-hmm. And we met. But that's how the race started, was me running the stairs there. And then probably 2 or 3 years later, I was in the bowl by myself one day. I had just run the stairs, and I was feeling it was crystal clear. Mm-hmm. And I was feeling that equal parts master of the universe. You'd just done something very hard, and total equanimity, like an egoless connection. And I remember thinking, this is by design. Like, how I feel right now is not an accident. Like, this is how mankind should feel. And I don't know why I had this thought, but I was like, how can I make others feel this way? And I thought, we need to race the F-bomb bowl. Yeah. And so came home and mentioned it to Kelly, and she said immediately, she's like, we're not doing anything if it's not going to raise money for Kindred Souls Foundation. And
okay.
And so but I was like, we got to race the stairs, Kelly. And so we argue, like, we don't know who coined the term, we're calling it Unleashed at Stadium Bowl, but it has become our primary fundraiser since 2011.
Okay. So, and tell our audience a little bit more about Kindred Souls. What is that?
Kindred Souls Foundation is our animal rescue down in the South Sound. We're a distributed network of foster and adoptive homes. We are looking to lease some acreage on Joint Base. But currently, right now, we're just a network of foster and adoptive homes. We have some programs. We kind of focus on the less adoptable animals. Okay. So we have like a seniors program where we match up senior folks with senior dogs and cats. We cover the bills, right? Everybody lives longer. It's cool. Okay. And that's awesome. Like a medically fragile program where even prescription drugs for pets can be onerous to owners, and so we have programs where we cover the bills for some of those for their medical needs, and okay. So that, again, everybody, sure. But it was something that Kelly and I had when we were living in Europe in probably '94. We were trying to figure out what we wanted to do with our lives. Okay. And after we'd each done we did our own list of 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, 15 years, 10 things, okay. Either stuff or achievement, and like 1-1 for me, because I was like 23 at the time, was like TV with remote, right? That was like what I wanted the most. And
the big goal in life.
Yeah, the big goal. And out at like 15 years, it's an interesting exercise actually to do, but out at like 10 to 15 years, you kind of allow yourself to dream. And both Kelly and I had written something to the effect of work for ourselves, or own our own business. And it was like, we didn't know when or what we wanted to do. And so we thought about when each of us had lost time. And for me, I had been a camp counselor, and for Kelly, it's always been around animals. So we had this idea of an animal camp. That was the big idea. Okay. And then we kind of rolled it back and how to get there. And it was like, Kelly needed to get her master's, maybe a PhD. I needed to finish my undergrad, get an MBA, get out of the Army, learn to sell, all these things. And as we started knocking down those hurdles, we realized, at the time I was the chair of the Lakewood YMCA, and kind of recognized that I don't think we really wanted a camp. We that had morphed, and we thought, but Kelly she's got like an internal divining rod for animals in need. Okay. Right, and this is the nascent days of the internet. So we'd find a dog or a cat, and Kelly was emailing everybody, take this. And so we thought, you know what? I brought home the bylaws of the Y one day and said, let's just incorporate. And this was, I think, summer of 04, when we decided to launch Kindred Souls. Okay. And we didn't have any money or didn't have any land, and we thought we'll just learn as we go. And so we drug a couple of neighbors down, made them appointed them our board members, and started. And since then we've kind of morphed to more of these less adoptable dogs and cats. So, and then Unleashed is our primary fundraiser for that effort. Okay. Yeah.
Have you guys kind of morphed that mission to the less adoptable animals, just because there's so many other organizations that are, if you got a cute, that's a cat, there's plenty of organizations.
Good question, really. I think Kelly and I are both drawn towards, maybe we're kind of like the underdog, sure. Folks. But yeah, there are a lot of, let's say, high turnover adoption. Sure. I think NOAA up north, great organization, great building actually. But yeah, they do a lot, and there are a lot of the animal welfare area is pretty broad, and there are a lot of areas that are kind of being covered, and we feel like this is our niche. Okay. That is uncovered.
Okay. Kind of go back to your life goals at 23. Where would you say, how successful have you been in that? One of the ones you mentioned was owning your own business was kind of a goal. I mean, you've got your hands on a lot of pies right now. Where's life taking you since then?
That's a good question. I think it's unfolded without as much my design as maybe I intended, but it worked out very well. I left the Army in '97. It had always just been a means to an end. Sure.
To clarify, that was active.
Yeah, that was active.
And then you went right into the Guard? Or?
Yeah, I did, because I was active duty enlisted, and I did my undergrad and grad school at night while I was in, always thinking that I'd get out and be a quote-unquote businessman, which I didn't really even know what that meant, know. And so I went out, but I stayed in the Guard, went through officer candidate school while I was still active, because I kind of thought more of like a boys club, right? Or just a club, something to be a part of. Plus I spoke Russian, and I thought, well, I should have the Guard help maintain the language, because I probably wouldn't do it on my own, sure. Right? And I was out for a few years, part-time, as a part-time soldier, and found, interestingly, that I was actually happier on drill weekends than I was going to work Monday morning.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite. Hey, don't tell anyone. I'm still yeah.
Well, you know what, though? I didn't own it. I worked for a propane business. Uh-huh. And it was interesting, too. I was account manager initially, then took over as district manager. And it was like interesting to learn business. But I felt like we underpaid our guys. And we were the price leaders, which made me feel like I was charging too much.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of ethical kind of things. And Kelly and I had, at the time, we had started an import business. We imported Polish pottery. Have you guys been to Europe?
Just on my R&R for the deployment set, but that's 2 weeks of my life.
Yeah, in the mid-'90s, when the wall went down, all the soldiers would go to the Czech Republic to buy glass, crystal, and you'd go to Poland to buy the pottery. Okay. And so we had started this pottery business. And so even while I was learning business and working for a company, I realized I was never going to be really happy unless I owned something. And I really did. Plus 9/11 happened, and like I knew we were going to rumble. And so I kind of did this. I had about a decade left of active service. Mm-hmm. And so it was, well, if I could find a full-time job in the Guard, I'll have a pension that's worth $1 million. Mm-hmm. And will I save that in this next decade? Probably not, right? Yeah. And so it kind of got down to this. I'm happier on the weekends. I actually am a soldier. I was happier being an officer, maybe you would agree, than being an NCO.
It's a better life, yes.
Yeah, you have more control and more influence.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the whole reason I moved over. You've got more ability to affect change for the positive, as opposed to just kind of obviously it's important being an NCO,
right.
Leading other soldiers, but, it's, as opposed to touching, one soldier at a time, you're kind of influencing the organization.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was the things that would drive me to distraction. I could fix most of those as an officer. Mm-hmm. So we were, I guess this goes all the way back to the question of the Army fit me like a glove, which I didn't. I almost had to leave to actually recognize. Sure. It gave us gave me enough leave to pursue other things like our animal rescue, and a steady paycheck, enough that Kelly could leave. She had a mental health practice for a while, and then she could leave that and take over the animal rescue pro bono, which she's done since '05. Okay. But it suited us very well, and kept me. I realize in retrospect that having very clear left and right boundaries was very important for me, like external boundaries, sure. Until I could define them for myself, Yep. And so now I feel, after I guess a career in the military, that defining those boundaries has still been somewhat of a challenge, but I understand the value in those. Sure. And it's allowed me and given, it's actually taken care of our family completely, and now I have the time to do everything that I care about and brings revenue into the Nelson household is almost directly from the Army. Okay. So, I mean, even our race started as officer PT when I was a battalion commander. Sure. As an example. So,
how much, as far as the race goes, how much of the participants or support are still kind of tied to the military? I mean, I know for our units, I think it usually happens on drill weekend, and we allow guys to volunteer and do that as part of their job.
Yeah, it's we still have a pretty good. It's flavored. Like 2 of the 146 Field Artillery is our starting gun always. The Guard usually brings their color guard to present the colors and sing the national anthem. We have the 341st and some Assad Pack as part of our volunteers. And we're actually going to reach out to Mission Continues, Team Rubicon, and Team Red, White, Blue. Okay. They've been partners that have participated in the race, but we're creating a new program to see if they would want to be like volunteer partners so that we can kind of professionalize. And it's the further away I get from the Guard, those relationships are fraying, right? And so getting a continual volunteer base is harder. Sure. But it's not a military race, but it has it's flavored, with a cannon as a starting gun and the national anthem. Sure. So.
Okay. Remind me, when did you retire from the Guard?
August of 2015.
Okay, so in those last 3 years, what has kind of taken up your time mostly? I mean, obviously you have this annual event. You've got the Kindred Souls. You also do some consulting work.
Yeah. I started a consulting company called Grit 360. If you're familiar with the Army Resilience Program, it's a mashup of cognitive behavioral theory, positive psychology, and sports psychology. And I got a lot out of that when I went to UPenn I was an early adopter that back in like 2010. So I built a business on that. It's been working mostly with the first responder community, which I really kind of fell into and have really liked. I also work part-time for a tech company where we do foreign language software. So I still work with the intelligence community, mostly in the reserve component, about how to integrate our product into their training schedule.
Okay.
So.
And that's why I sometimes see you around.
Yeah. So it's
I thought we got rid of you.
Yeah, exactly. But I still. It was funny. Even before I met the tech company back in 2009. This is again before we met. I had built a website where I built a team. I was essentially running a tech startup out of the Tacoma Armory, building LingFit. Right, it was a mashup of CrossFit principles and language training. So 10-minute wads of language training. And now what's funny is you hear micro learning. This was 2009 when we started this, so I think we were almost too far ahead of where.
A little ahead of the curve.
Yeah, a little ahead of the curve. The idea was correct, but we didn't have the tech to make it seamless. But we even had an app in 2009. We had an app for that.
Nice.
So yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's pretty early on.
I've
only been out 2 years.
Yeah. So it was fun. It was really a lot of fun, and that's how I met the tech company, Transparent. And so I still have a passion for language learning and I guess like just continued growth.
Sure.
It might be a theme in my life.
Yeah, I mean, knowing you, anyone who knows you would say you're definitely always learning, always exploring new ideas.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I mean, you kind of mentioned the left and right boundaries and that sort of thing. Is your wife pretty good about keeping you on track as far as that goes? Because I know you kind of get away, the idea can get away from you sometimes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, she's we are I guess opposites attract, right? So she is as introverted as I am, extroverted, and grounded as I am, flighty. Yes, the good idea fairy. Yeah. But what's interesting is what I realized is how much diet has to do with that. When I cut out high glycemic carbs, and I fast, like I'm fasting today.
You just mean like your ability to focus? Or?
It's like that ADD, ADHD vaporized.
Really?
Like,
interesting.
Like 98% of it.
Okay.
So still very, very curious, but the ability to focus, I think, was mostly sugar.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
it's
you're able
interesting.
to control a little bit more about where you want to.
Yeah, totally.
Spend your mental
totally.
energy. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Give us a little backstory. I mean, did you grow up in Tacoma? In
No.
Washington?
We lived in the Tri-Cities until I was in the 5th grade, and so we left Pasco the same year St. Helens blew, and I moved to Modesto, California.
Okay.
So I've always been a Seahawks and a Niners fan.
Okay.
And Modesto is south of Sacramento, east of San Francisco, right in the Central Valley. And lived there until went to college at a junior college there for a year, and then joined the Army and came up here. And it was the morning I woke up. We had a late snow. It was March of '89, and I was coming out of 525 replacement, which is right near the Corps headquarters on JBLM.
Okay.
And it was crystal clear. We had about 6 inches of snow the night before. And I walk out and I could see Mount Rainier, and then the parade field was all covered in this virgin snow, and that tree lined. It was so beautiful, Christian. I was literally stopped in my tracks, and I was like, this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Okay. I want to spend the rest of my life here.
Sealed the deal for you.
Yeah, instantly. Yeah, and so far it's worked out that way, right?
Yeah.
And of course went overseas and Kelly, I met Kelly. She's from Bellevue, and we came back here after Europe and have lived here since.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of getting into a little bit of we covered your backstory a little bit, but into like your personality and strengths and skill set and stuff. What would you consider your greatest strength to be?
Probably a mashup of curiosity and high energy.
Okay.
I'm insatiably curious. Mm-hmm. I have probably 1,100 books on my Audible account.
Sure.
And and I guess the high energy helps begin action on some of the things I'm curious about.
Sure. Well, and that's interesting. I don't know if I say interesting combination, because a lot of the people that I know are like idea people. They may be driven, but the whole starting something and then completing it can be very difficult, So like, I've seen the most success when people like that partner with people who are doers as opposed to just thinkers.
Yeah, I think in what is it, StrengthsFinder language, it's activator is one of my top strengths. Yep. And I'm happier doing, beginning, creating. And that's I guess, I don't know if you ever thought this, but as a kid, I used to think of creative and artistic as synonymous. And so I would say, because I am not artistic, I would think that I'm not creative. Okay. Even though we created a business, a nonprofit, and the truth is I'm very creative, just not musically,
sure, or not artistic.
Just not artistic,
Interesting. Okay.
So,
what would you say was one habit you wish you had?
I would say what I have been developing is, and it actually brought me more peace than I ever thought, is just being much more reflective and journaling. So meditating and reflection, which were things that I probably hadn't done for most of my adult life, and started meditating about a decade ago. Okay. And then journaling and just being much more reflective. Those things have helped ground me in a way that I didn't have before. Okay.
So you say meditating, you mean like making space to like stop and kind of reflect, as opposed to always kind of going and doing?
Well, I would say meditating specifically. I always meditate. Well, I try to meditate at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, and I either have my own kind of mantra and breathing thing that I go through. I'll set my watch for 10 minutes and do it. Or I really like the Sam Harris Waking Up podcast. Okay. Or not only the podcast, but his app. So usually I meditate in the sauna after working out, and I work out 5-7 days a week. So
sure, you're still full of energy.
Yeah. But so it's and then the reflection is, I think, the capacity for reflection comes from the fact that I have meditated, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Being able to stay more present with my own thoughts.
Okay. So as we are getting close to wrapping up here, I want to kind of get a little bit more into the specifics of what makes Brian tick.
Okay.
Do you have any like specific technology or life hacks that have changed your life? I mean, I know you always kind of.
You know what? It's fun. That's a good question as well, and I think the most recent that has been a real game changer is. Have you heard of the bullet journal?
Yeah. Yep.
I started bullet journaling about 2 months ago, and man, that has been super helpful because trying to mash my life into a Franklin Covey planner or just always made me feel terrible, like, inadequate. You get your day planned and then you take your notes somewhere else, and so the bullet journal has been a huge thing for me.
Okay. Now, what about that format resonates with you? Is it essentially just day one and it's free form?
Well, it was. I think that I could put my calendar, my notes, my journal, trackers all into one place.
Okay.
And so where I would frequently, I'd say I'd rather go to war than plan my day. That is a very, like, starting my day with a bullet journal, figuring out what I want to do, and then going back to it numerous times throughout the day, and then kind of checking on my trackers that I put in there. Okay. So it's, you can do whatever you want to track, right, is in there. And it's been a game changer for me. Okay. So
sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I have to check that out.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. I've told it to almost everybody since I started doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I know you listen to podcasts. So what would you say is your favorite podcast and why?
Besides the C-Town podcast, I like the Joe Rogan. I like the Tim Ferriss. I like Sam Harris. Okay. I like the Jordan Peterson when he does something.
Yep. That guy's smart.
Yeah. He's an important voice. And sometimes I'll listen to some of the fiction ones like Sex Lives and Videotape. Those are pretty good. But I think there's so much good content that between Ferriss, Harris, and Joe Rogan, that almost absorbs most of my podcast bandwidth.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of content just in those. I mean,
yeah, and they're all those long form. Right? Yeah, but they're really good. Sure. So.
Yep. What about books? I know you're a voracious reader or listener of books.
I'd say so. Fiction. I would say the Ken Follett's Century Trilogy is fantastic. Okay. So it's 3 books, Follow Giants. It follows 6 families from a few days before World War I up into the Obama administration. Okay. And it's so rich. I've listened to them like 3 times. It's 3 separate books. And then nonfiction, probably anything by Gladwell or Michael Lewis. I really like The Talent Code by Dan Coyle. Was what first got me started on LingFit, probably more than a decade ago. That's a very interesting read, how talent is built. So yeah,
good stuff. As we wrap up, what would you say is one piece of parting guidance that you could give our listeners?
Meditate and reflect.
Okay.
I don't want to. I feel uncomfortable giving guidance to unknown audience, but I'll tell you that for me has been huge.
Okay.
So spending some time to really determine what you want to do, where you're going in the right place,
Sure.
And that doesn't happen when you're doing all the time.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sounds pretty solid. Is there anything you'd like to add before we conclude our interview?
Well, with the race specifically, what we're trying to do is build community through shared struggle. Our theme is called Grit City Effort plus Shared Struggle equals Kindred Connection. And I'm a deep, deep believer in the vulnerability that happens when you're a mouth breather, when the stairs make us all mouth breathers. And we do a thing called a community partnership where an organization gets 10 people to register for our race, and then we brand them like a sponsor. Okay. So we put logos on our website, we tag them on Facebook, they're in our program guide, but then they get a 10 by 10 booth on the grass. And we are seeing actually, it's a fundraiser for our animal rescue. Kind of the higher order mission is team building at scale. I think our lack of connection is probably the most dangerous thing in our country right now. Sure. And so maybe it's the jock in me or the soldier, but I know that we come together. I think it was Rebecca Solent wrote Paradise is Built in Hell. Interesting read. But it's how humanity breaks out under these huge natural disasters. And I think the same thing happens with all-out physical effort. Sure. Is that
shared misery
brings us together. You actually love when you're a bent over mouth breather. Anyone who's done that with you in that moment, you love them, and it's real. And so what we're trying to do is engineer and extend that moment. And then maybe, I guess set the conditions for authentic connection, and maybe we can drop the long knives and don't care about who voted for who, or all this other.
That'd be great.
all this other drama, and maybe we could actually have an adult conversation and solve some things. So
actually care about each other.
Yeah. So
I like that.
Yeah.
So if people want to stay up to date on Unleashed at Stadium Bowl, know where to sign up, that sort of thing, where can they go?
So our website's unleashedatstadiumbowl.org. Our website for the animal rescue is kindredsoulsfoundation.org, and we have a Facebook page that I think is probably Unleashed at Stadium or something like that on Facebook. But you can find it from our website. And if you like the Facebook, or shoot us an email. Registration will start in May, and race is Sunday, August 4th.
All right.
All
Good
right.
stuff. Thanks for joining me today, Brian. Hope a lot of our audience can travel south for the Unleashed Stadium Bowl when that kicks off, and have a shared experience.
Awesome.
So, all right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Hey, appreciate it.
Yep.
Cool.
That wraps up this week's episode. Make sure to check out our guest website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they are doing. If you have any questions, know someone who should be a guest on here, or has a great story worth sharing, email me at christianharris@seatown.com. That's sea-town.com. I would also love it if you would go to iTunes and give us a review and a nice 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on great guests and provide exceptional content, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rank well in iTunes so others can find and enjoy the show. You can also find out more about me, how my real estate brokerage is breaking the mold and making a difference in our Seattle communities, and other projects I'm working on by visiting seatown.com, sea-town.com. Thanks for listening. The music for our podcast is courtesy of The Fascination Movement. You can find their albums in the iTunes Store. You can also listen to more episodes and find all our show notes on our website at seatownpodcast.com. This has been a Seatown Media production.